Hello and welcome to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast. I'm here with Paul. How are you doing today, Paul?
Hello, mate. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing all right, thank you. So, a couple weeks ago, we were actually talking about the fact that it was the 30th anniversary of Heroes Quest, and then later known as Quest for Glory. And it just occurred to me that earlier this year was the 30th anniversary of another one of my favorite adventure games of all time, Space Quest 3. You're a fan of the Space Quest series, right?
I am.
Of course you are. Of course you are. Because if you weren't, you would be kicked off the show. So, March, I believe, of 1989, Space Quest 3 came out. Space Quest is probably my favorite Sierra series outside of Quest for Glory, and 3, I actually like to think, is probably the best of that series. What do you think?
I wouldn't argue that. I've got a weird Space Quest. I think I like it so much because it's like a tie for first between like three of them. I really like 3, 4, and 6 a lot. But yeah, for argument's sake, I'd say so. It is the bloody like paradigm of adventure games for me. Space Quest 3. It's like peak Sierra. It's got all the feels. They had everything figured out, by this third game. It was definitely peak before they switched over to like SCI. It was like one of their finest offerings.
Well, actually, it is SCI. It was the first of the Space Quest to be an SCI.
First of them, okay.
Yeah.
My mistake.
So you were saying 3, 4, and 6. Funny enough, I actually personally preferred 1, 3, and 5. Not in that order of preference, but order of chronology. I've played and finished 2 a long time ago. I only really did it once because it just never really brought me back to it. 4 was a really good game, but I never really felt the desire to play it again. But 1, 3, and 5, each of them I played like multiple times over and over again.
Well, I've got a lengthy counter as to why you're wrong. No, obviously, I do get that. One's kind of got that, like, it's got like a free pass because it's 1. But if I was being fair, it was a little more boring than I maybe remembered it being.
Really?
Yeah, when I went back to it recently, but a lot of it too is I got a lot of the Space Quest games mixed up. Like for a long time, I thought 4 was 5 and 5 was 4, so I probably just confused a lot of people when talking about them. But I thought 1, for some reason, and this is from like my old childhood memory, so, give me some slack, but I thought 1 was 3 for like a long time until I went back to them recently.
How?
I don't know. It was more like just mental imagery, like a recap of it. And I kind of told myself that like Monolith Burger and specifically the when you're in the garbage dump, getting the spaceship. For some reason, I copy and pasted those visuals to the first one.
Oh, weird.
So when I went back and played the first one, I was obviously a little disappointed.
Right.
Well, I think even though we exactly disagree on our favorites, I think we can agree that Space Quest 2 was probably the weakest.
Right, yeah. I would agree with that. And so we agree that 2 is probably the weakest. We agree that 3 is probably the best. And then we disagree on all the rest from there. Is that how it goes?
Exactly. Yeah, so we agree on just enough for this episode, I think.
All right, sounds good. Let's begin. Space Quest 1, I'd say it's kind of like really close between 3 and 5 for my favorite. 3 being definitive, 5 being like just a hair under, and 1 just being like a hair under that. Like Space Quest 1 is probably my third, just because it's like, there's a few design choices. It's a really short game, but otherwise it's just fantastic. Like I love it nails a certain tone very perfectly for me that I think probably isn't, I think they only really came closest with Space Quest 3 in terms of matching that tone, where it is basically a sci-fi game first with Easter eggs, as opposed to when, later in the series when it just became full-on parody, of which it's not neither here nor there, because Space Quest 5 was full-on parody, and that's also one of my favorites. But Space Quest 1, it was actually kind of really, other than like Easter eggs, it was kind of, it was played pretty straight. It was just like a space adventure game with just references here and there.
Yeah, no, I agree. The Space Quest one was actually kind of intense. Like that might sound like I'm exaggerating, but I'm kind of not. Like, and going back to it recently, I mean, it has a creepy. I mean, if you look at it in a different light than how we all remember Quest, which is more the parody side. But if you kind of free your mind of that for a second, Space Quest 1 starts off with like, you know, like an alarm flashing and dead bodies everywhere. And there's a few scenes where when I went back to Space Quest 1, I was expecting something lighter, I think I could say.
Yeah.
I again, that might sound silly, but if it sounds silly, go revisit 1 again, because it is kind of shockingly intense. Like you said it best. It's a space sci-fi game first with Easter eggs. You said it perfectly.
Yeah.
But I will say, on the contrary, I think 3 is a huge departure from it. I feel like 3 is the when they almost kind of retconned it into more of a parody like series. But I do see 3 as the start of that for sure.
Well, for 1, it was, I agree with like it being scary, because I remember especially playing it when I did. I played it on my first computer, which is an Amber Monochrome. I think this is like the 3rd game I ever played on that computer, and the second, the second Sierra game I ever played was Space Quest 1. And so playing it on this Amber Monochrome screen, and, things were a little bit slower now, or sorry, not now. Things were a bit slower then. You can speed things up quite a bit now, and but at the time, even at its fastest, it was really quite a slow-moving game, which kind of just added a lot to the tension for me, especially when your character goes from screen to screen, and amongst all these dead bodies everywhere, you find out pretty quick that you're basically the only survivor, except for like you talk to one guy moments before he dies, and then you are like literally the last one. And then every now and then it'll be like, they'll say you hear footsteps coming, right? And then you gotta find a way to either backtrack off the screen if you have nowhere to hide, or you have to hide behind something so that they don't see you, because these aliens are marching around searching for survivors that they'll shoot on sight. And I really want to make this clear that I am talking about the original Space Quest 1, the AGI version, because when it was remade into VGA, I'm not sure if there was also an EGA version, but basically the point and click SCI version, I found that they really ruined a lot of the tone by really going with very heavily on more of a comedic tone. I think that's probably a lot of the more consistent with later games in the series. How it kind of went with more goofy comedy, but it was kind of very stark contrast to the feel that I got from playing the first one in the original AGI. Because now like apparently your ship looks like a roast goose or something like that. And it's like you look. It looks like a cooked chicken for some reason, because that's funny to some people, I guess. I don't know.
Your ship is old meat.
Yeah, and like rather than this feeling of like you just being like the only one wandering around these empty halls with like dead bodies everywhere, now they have like these robots flying around flailing their arms in the air, screaming, and it's like, well, that just really.
Yeah, robots with Kermit the Frog arms.
Yeah, exactly. Kermit arms.
No, you're right. It's almost like Sierra also forgot that Space Quest 1 was darker, let's just say. Kind of like what we were saying, like you kind of forget, you bundle it all together and think of it as the lighthearted parody, spoofy kind of universe. And I mean, Sierra was definitely, I would say, trying to force the first one into being like the third onwards ones,
Yeah.
Like, and I hated the VGA because the artwork to me, the art direction to me was very Leisure Suit Larry. Like it just didn't, I don't know, it didn't seem to fit Space Quest for me. It looked just so much like the Leisure Suit Larry VGAs, and it was just a little too cartoony. Like
I can kind of agree with that. It's very like Leisure Suit Larry 5 kind of look to it, which is fine with your Leisure Suit Larry 5, but not so much when you're Space Quest 1. And don't get me wrong, for people who are thinking about this, who are just like, oh, what about this was hilarious, this was hilarious. Oh, Space Quest 1 was hilarious as well. Like there were some really good moments in there that were pretty funny, but it's just there are these moments of comedy in amongst like this what is at its heart just a sci-fi adventure. And there are things like the Blues Brothers playing at this in the cantina, and then there's ZZ Top sometimes, and but I don't know. It's even kind of hard to even think of really hilarious moments because it really was just kind of played as like, there's some wry humor here and there, but it was just like, I hate to keep saying this over and over again like a broken record. It was just a sci-fi adventure.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and also to anybody, thinking conversely, it's kind of like think of it as these kinds of series that go on for a while, they take a little time to find their personality, find their feet and exactly who they are. And Space Quest 1, probably 2 as well, it's just not on the nose how it became. Like from I think 3 onwards, definitely 3 because of the Arnold robot. It was just very on the nose, which is fine. It's not a critique. I absolutely love it. But yeah, it was more subtle, for the first one, the humor that is.
Mm-hmm. So moving on to 2, and I'm going to kind of have to rely on you a lot for this one because I really don't remember a whole heck of a lot about it. I know they kind of went with Planet of the Apes for the beginning, and that's kind of where I guess Vohal at the end kind of has that Darth Vader look to him, like Darth Vader after he's been destroyed. And that's kind of all I really remember about that game because, like I said, it didn't really it didn't capture me the way any of the other games did.
Yeah, exactly. It was, I mean, I guess, unfortunately, the most memorable part about this game for me probably is that bloody maze in the garden.
Yeah, there's
and
that.
That's a rough way to be remembered in an adventure game, is by a maze, because, and obviously not remember it because it's fun. I really liked the beginning of Space Quest 2, where you're like out on the deck and your broom drifts off into space or whatever, and you get called in. I don't know why I liked that a lot, and I did like the army of salesmen at the end of it. I think just to even look at it,
right? Yeah.
It was it was a kind of a cool aesthetic, especially at the time or whatever. But yeah, I've mentioned before on the podcast, so I won't harp on it. But I just thought it was a huge mistake to take a Space Quest game where you can go anywhere in the known galaxy and make up anything you want, and then to have the player spend the whole game in a jungle, which just. Just a huge oversight, perhaps. Like I feel like it was just some person at Sierra stopped and was like, "Hey, why are we
like? Do you get very many changes of scenery? Like, there's the ship, there's the jungle planet. Was there anything else? Because at least even Space Quest 1, you got like, you had the Arcadia ship. Then you escape that and you go to the what's it called? The
yellow planet.
Yeah. The sand planet. Oh damn, I totally forget what it's called. And then even then you travel into a different section of that where it's the Eulens Flats. And then from there you fly over to the Deltar. So there's at least like a good 4 locations, good scene changes there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head as to why 2 it feels so stale. Like, maybe I might hyper focus on their choice to put it in a jungle, but I think it more comes down to what you're saying. Because in 2, you get the very, very short part of the beginning. You're in the spaceship, and then the meat of the game is just green. It's just a green game for a long time. You're just in a really green and brown forest, and I'm sure there's a bunch of different backgrounds, but it all just looks like trees and water, and then there's the very end scene where you're with Vol and he makes the guys or whatever, the salesman. Yeah. So even talking about it, I stopped paying attention to myself.
I'm already bored of this. Let's move on. Space Quest 3. And this is kind of like, I think, where they hit the peak balance between the two. It was still this sci-fi adventure game, but it also had a lot of parody to it. So they had, like you mentioned before, they had the Arnoid, the Annihilator. So he was pretty much just the Terminator and coming after you. And then you have like the aluminum mallard, which is basically the Millennium Falcon. That doesn't look too much like it, but obviously it's in the name, right?
Right.
And then you get like Monolith Burger, which is obviously Space McDonald's. Which, damn, now I want McDonald's. It always does that to me.
Me too.
Okay. And then once you escape in the aluminum mallard into space, you have several different, there's like 3 planets in Monolith Burger, and you can actually at any time go back and forth between them. You won't survive very long in Ortega unless you have the thermal underwear, but otherwise you could say where you want to go at any time. So that was really kind of cool. It kind of opened it up to a little bit more. It felt more explorative at this point.
Yeah, exactly. That's my biggest takeaway from this too. It was I think the first time in a game as well that I felt like I was in a world and I could go where I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in space, no less.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, there were some funny references like the Nukem Dukem robots, right? Which is obviously like the Rock'em Sock'em robots.
Yes.
And but ultimately, again, it came down to just being a sci-fi adventure. And sure, there was the things like, the goal in the end is to save the two guys who are the literal designers who made the actual game. And you return them to Sierra, and you meet Ken Williams at the end, and it's funny and it's great and it's hilarious. It's one of the few times the fourth wall breaking actually kind of worked for me as humor. But again, this was still at a time when it was very much like it wasn't. There were parody elements to it, but the game itself wasn't a parody, or at least not. It didn't feel that way to me in tone.
Yeah, because I don't think it didn't lean too heavy into the fact that it could have fun and it could be silly. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if it was just jokes and gags, we would be recollecting it much differently in a more hollow sense. But like you're saying, like they stuck to making it an adventure. Like, what if you were just some guy and you could go where wherever you want to go and explore these different kind of worlds? Like it definitely worked. There was still like objectives and A to B's, and then, had fun with it on the way. And as far as the fourth wall breaking, that was one of the many times that it got me. I really liked it once again.
Yeah. Or actually, I shouldn't even really say fourth wall breaking. I mean, I guess it kind of is, but I think it's more. I think probably a better term for it is just the meta humor, because it's not really fourth wall breaking, because they don't really turn to the camera and say, "Hey, get that thing." But it is more just sort of like, there's meta humor in that there's jokes that we are obviously supposed to know are real life references. To like the literal two guys from Andromeda and literally Sierra headquarters with Ken Williams and that sort of thing. So, the meta humor was on point. I actually really enjoyed it in this one.
I did too. And I remember as a kid, I loved how self-aware it was. Not that I would have known to have called it that as a kid, but I just loved how they ended up in Sierra, and it did, Sean Mills kind of alluded to this brilliantly, which is like they did a great job of making themselves larger than life.
Yeah,
these game devs at Sierra at that time, and this game hits that right on the head, where it's like, suddenly they feel like legendary people that you'd want to meet.
I think 3 actually started a lot of these little trends that sort of persisted throughout the series. Like, I think, because 3 did introduce Monolith Burger, which I think appears at least in number 4 and possibly numbers. Did Monolith Burger appear again after 4? I can't remember, but
I feel like it did. But yeah, I couldn't actually say confidently where and when, but I think it had to have. It
was in Jones in the Fast Lane.
That's true. Yes. Yeah, with Astro Chicken. Yeah. Well, the best thing to do for 4, I guess, is it was as you mentioned earlier, the time travel through kind of different games, and then you're being hunted down by Vohal, but he's like sludge now.
Oh, okay.
And so you basically you're being chased through time. So you go this is when I think you start off in Space Quest 10. But it was kind of, okay, there is no Space Quest 10 technically, but in the game it's like, when you go through time, at the top of the screen, it'll switch from Space Quest 4 to say Space Quest 10.
Yeah.
And it plays out as like kind of like a chapter. Like 10 was like the latex babes of Estros?
That's right. Yeah. Estros.
So it's like you spend the actual amount of time in the future in Space Quest 10, and it's the girls you end up under the cave and you end up rescuing them. And that's, I think, then you leave them in their cave dwelling thing and go to the mall. But yeah, I guess you could just say it's like a time jumping, running away from being killed, which I guess is kind of happening. It's kind of a theme, right? Roger being chased by somebody.
And this one I really felt is where they really start to go very heavy on the references as humor. because they there's one of the puzzles is that you have to capture the Energizer Bunny and steal his battery. And then, you go to Space Quest 10, which is the Latex Babes of Estros, which is like a full-on parody of the Leather Goddesses of Phobos.
Right.
And then, there's so many different... I just felt this is sort of like the part where Space Quest turned into more of, like what you said, Space Quest 1 VGA was trying to be.
Yes. Yeah. And that's probably, I would guess that the VGA remake was probably done around the time as 4. I'm totally guessing.
Yeah.
But it would kind of make sense. Like, it almost tried to, shoehorn 1 into looking like this exact game. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of similar to 3 for me. You're right. It is a little heavier in the hand as far as parody and everything is concerned. But it reminds me very much of 3, just a lot of parallels as far as just being chased. Maybe it's because of the visuals of the worlds that you go to. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's one of my favorites. I think it almost felt like an extension of 3.
Right.
Obviously with a slightly different plot. You're being
like a
chased,
sequel?
times different. Yeah.
Does 4 seem like a sequel to 3?
Almost. Not exactly. What's this new term you've come up with? Sequel.
It'd be really interesting if it seemed like a sequel. So, okay, well, I don't remember a lot of the details. I just remember that the general premise of it is that you're saved by a person who turns out to be your son from the future. And he saved you because he needs you to survive long enough to meet his mother, your future wife, or we would assume your future wife. We'll get to that in a second. And and then he shows you. I think you pointed out it's kind of hilarious. He's like, I can't tell you too much about her, but here's her name and what she looks like. And basically introduces you to the character that you're going to spend like the entirety of Space Quest 5 trying to eventually win over. So, getting to Space Quest 5, this is like, this is kind of when it really just committed to the parody. Like, this is just when they just like didn't give a crap anymore. They're just like, okay, just all out parody. Every step, everything, every item, every moment, every piece of this game is a parody of something. So like the general premise of the game is entirely Star Trek. Like, there's no part of it that isn't Star Trek. Like, you become the captain of of a ship finally, and you've got the characters who are kind of based on Star Trek characters. The uniforms are very kind of calling back to sort of a Star Trek kind of style.
Yeah,
and even just outside of that,
yeah. Oh, sorry, I was gonna say, like the whole university, the way it starts off in the beginning, it just has a very Starfleet Enterprise sort of feeling, like an academy.
It's definitely supposed to be a Starfleet. What you call it? Analogy. There's a better word for that, but that's what I'm going with for now. And even then, and even when you're going through this school, you'll see things like there'll be an alien, and he's wearing like a Starfleet Academy uniform. Right, and Alien is in like the xenomorph from the Alien movies,
right?
And you'll be walking down the hallway, and you'll see Obi-Wan fighting Darth Vader in a lightsaber battle down one of the halls, and you'll take a test, and your final exams you're taking, and Worf is sitting behind you, and just every screen, every single thing, every moment in this is a parody, contains a parody or is a parody of something, and because they just like went full out and. And again, like, they do it well, because what they do is they kind of, if there is a sort of a parody, it's something that you can just ignore. If you don't understand the reference, it doesn't really affect you negatively. Like, you'll still get the idea of what's going on, even if you don't happen to know what movie or TV show this reference is from. Or sometimes they'll even have like, I can't think of like a really good example, but I did think about this last time I was playing through it a couple years ago, where a lot of the references are layered. So it's actually kind of like one joke references a couple of different things. So even if you miss one, there's still possibly something else that you can find funny about it. So as I mentioned before, this is the second time that you come across an android that's sent to you by the Jipazoid Novelty Company. So it's just like this little this little toy manufacturer just keeps sending these death droids out to kill you for stealing their whistle, which is kind of funny, which is really funny in and of itself.
I love it because at no point, when the second game, did you ever think that would stick? Like it just seemed like a dodgy kind of joke, sort of. You're like, oh, whatever. And it's just, man, it's relentless from there on out.
The Jipazoid Novelty Company is pretty much like your main antagonist in the series by this point. I think even Vohal just basically got settled by the end of 4. And this one's going to haunt you all the way to 6.
Yeah.
But basically, you're early on in the game, you meet, you finally come across your destined to be baby mama, I guess. We'll call her, because whether or not you actually get married is kind of up in the air. And so you basically have to end up together, and that's basically all stuff happens. A plot between the primordial soup goop thing that's like turning people into these like sludge monsters, which I think Quirk had a hand in or something like that. The intricacies of the story, as many times as I played it, it never really stuck with me. It's been a game about moment to moment, and all the moments are great, even if I can't mentally connect them into like one solid plot.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. When you asked me to describe 4, and I realized I kind of couldn't, even after kind of championing it for a bit. That's a great way. That's exactly why, though, because with the Space Quest games, it's so moment to moment. Like, it's not even really about the big picture. You just, I don't know. I'm going different places because I have to. Like, wherever. It's not about that. It is just the moments and how they piece together.
Which is weird, because there actually is, like, this one actually did make an earnest attempt to have like a really good story to it. If you actually pay attention and you follow through what's going on, there's like this whole story about about what happened. It's just hard to remember it because all the moments just outshine it.
No, but that's a good point, that not to skip quickly over, because I do think 5 has the best story structure of them all.
Mm-hmm,
like
absolutely.
It's like a really solid, surprisingly complex story.
Yeah, which is revealed to you bit by bit.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's probably the smartest of all the games. The smartest in the way it goes about everything. It doesn't go super. I mean, not to contradict you, because I agree with what you said in the beginning, but the delivery of the silliness is it's more subtle than 4. Even probably 3. With like the Arnold cop comes to mind as just being super on the nose. Where 5 is a little. I do think it's a little sleeker in its references. Maybe that's just because it has a strong story. I don't know.
I think they really doubled down on the references at any rate, if for nothing else than in quantity. But again, like I said, a lot of it is a sort of like. Actually, no, it's not even like they were subtle about it. Like the Spike, your little pet, is a face hugger from Alien. Or at least like a ripoff of it. The female android, the female Arnold android, basically becomes a member of your crew. Cliffy is basically Scotty from Star Trek, and there's so many references and parodies in this thing. It really is. They really did kind of really go all in with the inside jokes on this one, compared to any of the games that came before it.
I definitely agree. There's something in the delivery of it for me, and I'm kind of thinking now it's the aesthetics of the environment in Space Quest 5 is a bit more, for lack of a better term, is a bit more like serious than Space Quest 3 or 4. Like 3 or 4, they have like a really fun look to them, like this crazy futuristic mall or whatever the case is, where you spend a lot of time in 5, in the ship, for example. So I think it's almost like the environment. It doesn't look as kind of silly.
I think 5 is definitely on the silly scale. Like, I think it's definitely on the silly side of the scale. Um, I think 4 is probably the silliest. I think 5 is kind of not as silly, but it's still up there. And we'll just get right to, okay, you meet your baby mama at the end, and 6 is when they just go like I would even say the 6 kind of jumped the shark at this point, because and that's why I kind of never really got into it enough to really even finish it, because it's sort of, this is the one where they just kind of went full on like, okay, we're gonna, if Space Quest 5 was double down on in jokes and references, Space Quest 6 was triple down. Like, they just like crossed the line of like, okay, what is even going on anymore? And,
Yeah, it is a sliding slope when you look at the Space Quest games. They literally get more silly each one.
Mm-hmm.
The right down the line.
Which again leads to some really good humor. Like, there's some really funny moments in 6. Some of the funniest moments in the series are in 6.
Yeah, I don't mind. I love how more serious and kind of intense 1 is, but I also love how ridiculous 6 is. So yeah, going forward, there is no right or wrong. It's just observations on both our parts as to how they differ from each other. Mm-hmm. But yeah, 6. It's like you're still happy with it. I'm still traveling throughout space, and I'm still this guy, and there's hardly any like kind of funny video games from this time. Mm-hmm. That's harsh, because I mean, there's Leisure Suit Larry, arguably a lot of the LucasArts ones, but comedy was tough. It still is a really tough medium to tackle in video games. So I was always appreciative of the Space Quest series, but 6 to my verdict on it, and the reason I like it so much, I think, is because I didn't play it like growing up back in the day. Let's just say I played Space Quest 1 through 5 as soon as I could get a hold of them. Yeah. But I didn't play 6. Whatever life happened, I think I'd stopped playing games for a bit. So my point is, from my experience, by the time I got to play 6, I was well removed of the whole experience of Space Quest. So to me, it was just like a great game. Right. And that's why I kind of argue that well, there's no need to protest. Nothing's going to change. The company's out of business. But I was kind of trying to say to people skeptical, is like, look at 6 as just a standalone adventure. Like
well, I mean, they kind of made themselves a standalone. I mean, the through line that they kept was the them sending these Arnold droids after you, to kill you over that whistle. But then they also completely as you brought up. This is one that you brought up, because I didn't even get this far into the game. You brought up that they just completely ignored the entire plot of 4 and 5 by throwing away the fact that you met this woman who's supposed to be your wife and gives birth to your child. And they're like, oh yeah, that forget about that. Here's a new person for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I guess my whole look at it as a standalone adventure, that's what I have to tell myself to not get just kind of angry, because 6 really drops the ball. They it's like they forgot how 5 ended, because it's I don't want to say it's 5's not a cliffhanger, but you do expect a continuation of the story. And in 6, it's just
because you mentioned before how you confuse 4 and 5, so I'm just wondering if you might be confusing them right now, because 4 ends kind of on a cliffhanger, because he introduces you to the concept that you're going to meet this woman eventually.
God, yeah, I was thinking of 4 again. Yeah. I don't know why I've got them so mixed up.
And see, 5 actually could have been the end of the series, because you meet her and it implies that you're going to get married and live happily ever after, because like the final word, the final line of the game is that, you basically give your last order to like go away, and whatever her name is, Beatrice Wankmeister, she gives the final command. It says engage, and gives you a kiss on the cheek, which, is the double entendre of, engage the order, but also, engage as in like, we're going to get married. Right. And so it ends there, and that's where the series could and probably should have ended.
6, I think that was really affected, again, in a good way, in my opinion, but either which way for anybody else, but it was affected a lot by the voice, the ability for voice acting. You know, it was like another dimension added on to this whole series, and I mean, well, narration from Gary Owens, that's, you know, 90% of the humor in this game. Probably to begin with, or for me, as far as humor that lands, I could listen to him all day. It's so mint. But yeah, it's interesting, you know, having a take on him now with like more snarky back and forth and stuff like that. That was kind of unfamiliar from before.
Mm-hmm. And then 6 also did, like, you know, there was a lot of, like, I don't know, humor that just never really struck me as funny. Like, things like, you come across that guy from Space Quest 3 who ran the little souvenir shop in that game, and you come across him again, I believe, in Space Quest 6. And they, like, and I don't know, they just kind of, like, they turn him into a slob, and he, like, which, not to say that he wasn't really before, but they really, like, you know, I think he, like, picks his ear, pulls out some wax and eats it or something like that. It's like, really? Is that kind of what we're going for now? Is that where our humor is gone by this point? Like, there's a lot more toilet humor in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. This game kind of does make me wonder what the other ones would have been like if they had this you know, super high res art that they used and the voice acting, because you know, it really does. Mm-hmm. They definitely used what they had. You know, they went with, you know, newer technology, newer abilities, which was great. But it changed the universe a little bit. Like that guy, and I did try and find his name before we recorded, and I couldn't find it. I'm not sure if he has one. He probably does. But anyway,
which one?
Who turned into a slob, works at the store.
Oh, right.
Yeah, just looking at those guys there.
He does have a name. I know he does. I just forget what it is at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure I should go back and look at how I tried to explain that to Google. Well, yeah, anyway, that guy's name aside, my overall point is when a game suddenly has, like, this ability to you know, do little animations like him picking his ear and eating it, like in the pixel art that might not have translated. So my point is, like, now that the studio and the makers had abilities to go with voice acting and you know, more high def graphics and stuff like that, I say that, you know, lightly. It changes, like, your perception of what you thought the characters were. You know, almost like a movie adaptation to a book, and it just they just read a different book than you, kind of feeling. You're like, yeah, I picture the main character as short and lumpy, not, you know, Chris Hemsworth or whatever. So it's like one of those where they had the ability now to even just giving Roger, like, a voice. Like, I never thought it would sound like that, or it can be a little, it can be almost like a little jarring. And there's so many reasons why 6 doesn't work as 6. It just works as, like, a random game. Yeah. Because, like you said, 5 really does wrap up the entire series quite nicely. It brings a curtain to that whole style of art, and I'm guessing 6 wasn't made with SCI engine, so, you know, it brought the curtains down on a whole era of games. And then 6 comes in, you know, in the age of better graphics and voice work and CD-ROM, etc. And it's real weird. Like, I just happen to have found the game really fun to play, it
is fun. I don't want to sound like I'm, like, saying it's a bad game or anything. It kind of really is, like, the 180 from where Space Quest for me really felt like it started. And like I said, I fully admit that Space Quest 6 has some of the funniest moments in the entire series. Probably the funniest moments in the entire series.
Yeah, if anything, thanks to Gary Owens probably on that, because that makes it for me. But
that too. He's probably
and I know you have fun with the game and everything, and I do too. It's like I always totally understand when people don't like the game, because on paper I kind of shouldn't. Like, the story kind of, it doesn't, like, anger me like I'm gonna write a letter about it, but it is annoying as a fan to go through the first 5 games, and this one, he just starts off like single and gets with, like, some random girl named Stella, where, you know, it's real weird. Like, there's a lot of parts about it where it's kind of aggravating. I personally, little things, like, I much prefer, like, pixel art to this style. There's so many reasons I kind of shouldn't like the game. but I just, it just so happens to be like kind of enjoyable to go through. But as like a Space Quest 6, it's super annoying.
What really is left to say about the series? Like, is there, would you sooner get rid of, let's say, Space Quest 6 is because it causes it causes a lot of loose ends? Or would you rather have a Space Quest 7 that tries to tie up those loose ends? And if you're going to go with Space Quest 7, you better be presenting solutions. So you better be explaining how this stuff is going to make sense.
I would say, God, probably for that reason alone too. I would, if I was given the rights and I these people could magically make another actual licensed Space Quest game, I would act like 6 never happened. Yeah, I would like retcon the whole situation and pick up from 5. And you don't even have to do much. It's just like, just don't ignore what the other games laid out. That's all. Like, I don't need a game about him and his wife now that 5 ended with him getting married, but just don't have him be like, oddly single and flirty and then with a different girl and no explanation. Like, if they didn't even bring up women in 6, everything would have made more sense. Not women, but a love life for him.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know. It's weird that they would go that way. I mean, you'd think it wouldn't have been that hard just to like replace that character with Beatrice Wankmeister. Like, why not just incorporate her into it? So now that you met her, now you have to save her life, kind of thing. Like, why did they need a whole new character?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to tweak the script like a little bit, but you could probably just make her stellar. Like just have the girl love interest in 6 just be your bloody wife. There's kind of no reason Stellar couldn't be Beatrice. It's really strange. They just dropped that. I've never thought about it before this moment, but off the hip, I'm kind of thinking it was maybe for comedy. Like, they thought they could get more out of like single guy quips and stuff like that. I really don't know.
I don't know. I think it would have been I don't know. Maybe it would have been more interesting if they presented them as a married couple, because that'd be kind of funny, right? That'd be like, they had like marriage squabbles and little bickerings between them that married couples
right.
would do.
Play. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could play the married with children angle on it real quick all day. Yeah, I'd prefer any version just acknowledging that over this one. Like I've said before, if Roger went all of 6 without ever talking about a love interest at all, it would have been fine. I wouldn't have felt like, well, that's weird. He got married in 5. Where's the wife? I wouldn't have wondered. It'd just be like, now he's off on an adventure. But so it was just strange that they created a problem that wasn't asked for. It wasn't there.
Yeah. It's a good point. If you just took that out, there would be no real problems with Space Quest 6 other than just, it's just the end of the evolution of from where Space Quest started in Space Quest 1 to the style of Space Quest 6. But, a lot of the series did that. A lot of them are, even Leisure Suit Larry, even Police Quest are very different from how the series started to how they ended. And for better or worse, usually not as good because,
it could have been King's Quest 8,
Yeah. Ooh.
Got him.
I think, and honestly, I don't want to have to keep bringing up Quest for Glory, especially where it's not entirely relevant, but it's kind of relevant. So like, that's kind of like the one series that actually maintained its consistent tone throughout the entire series. Everything else really kind of evolved and landed quite a distance away from where they started.
That's a great point. Yeah, I never thought about it, but I would say probably by leagues. It's the most uniform, probably by far.
But yeah, I mean, I guess now that we've gone through the entire series, but we have established that Space Quest 3 was our mutual favorites, or at least the one that we can agree on. Is there anything else that remains to be said about Space Quest?
Two things. Earlier, we brought up you had asked about where Astro Chicken was, and I remembered it, but we'd already moved on to the next game. We'd already moved on to 5, but in 4, in the mall, there's an Astro Chicken.
Was it Astro Chicken or Monolith?
Monolith. Sorry,
Monolith. Okay,
he's everywhere. I think there's a Miss Astro Chicken game you can play in the arcade in the mall.
Oh, I forgot all about that.
Yeah. Which, by the way, they work on Scum. You can play them just like individually.
Nice.
There's a little, it was kind of cool. What else was I going to say? I'll make this quick because we could get into it forever, and I know we're at the end here. But you brought up a point way in the beginning that was awesome, where you said the slow pacing of Space Quest 1 worked in its advantage, and that really got me thinking, because it really does, like the fact that you have to kind of meander, like you feel really vulnerable when it takes super long to get across a room and you know something's coming. So it's like, you can just kind of feel like anything around you would be faster than you, and that you were in a vulnerable spot. And it seems like that mechanic was probably a coincidence that it worked out that way for them, but I don't think that's a risk a studio would take today. Like, if we make it take a long time, that'll build anticipation. So that was kind of cool. I wanted to just touch on that real fast. And then the last thing I'll say on Space Quest was my favorite animation scene, screenshot, whatever, from probably any adventure game ever, is when the two guys are stuck in gelatin in Space Quest 3. I love that so much.
Yeah.
And I bring it up just to put it in everyone listening's heads. They can get a mental visual of that green jello wiggling around. That was so satisfying. So that's my point.
Yeah, no, there's so much to love about 3. Like, 3 is just so awesome. I especially love the fact, I don't know, this is one of those things where I actually really love the fact that you do get to meet the two guys from Andromeda, because it's just, even from the beginning, there were, the two guys from Andromeda. They were dressing in the silly pig snout and glasses and stuff like that. And it just kind of made sense that you would just run into them eventually. It was really cool that they did that.
It was, and it was actually like really... It was really well, like, smooth. It was really, like, well done. It wasn't like forced into the game. Like when I first got to Scumsoft, like I took that as a joke on LucasArts or whatever, and just kept playing the game. And then I was like, oh my God, it led into the two guys. It was like the perfect barrier into that meta humor. It wasn't ham-fisted at all.
I'm sure that Scumsoft kind of represents a little bit of everything. I think they just kind of took all these aspects of different things and kind of all piled them in there. I read into it as Microsoft and LucasArts. And then I think, again, I heard posts here and there saying that it was also kind of a parody of the work conditions of Sierra, how they're all like kind of chained to their desks and, things hovering around, people walking around cracking the whip and stuff like that. So,
right.
Like I said, there's a little bit of everything, I'm sure, was just all incorporated into it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you thought of it that way. This is what people argue on the internet about. Now we've got a new thing to add to the conversation.
Which is why I like having a podcast, because they can't argue back. Just kidding. You can reach us at mail@classicgamersguild.com. Or you can join our page, join our group. You can donate to us on Patreon, so you can pay me to shut up, or pay me to talk more. It depends what you want. Seriously, if you pay me enough, you can kick me off the show, get somebody else to talk with Paul.
What?
Or you can also angrily tweet me at the CG Guild. That sounds confusing, because it is. But yeah, so that's it for our plugs. Is there anything you'd like to close out with, Paul?
Jesse Eisenberg was a good Lex Luthor.
Oh, you're just really asking for it now.
Don't do murder.